The Traveller's League Book 1 The Timepiece, written by Nick Goss. Mirrors. Hoops's room was just like he'd left it, and the clock still said 7:15 p.m. His bed felt extra soft and warm though. His leg ached from all the running and his heart still beat quickly. Luckily, there was no Ridgeback toxicator. Phew, he sighed to himself. His stomach growled and he realised he should have eaten dinner before going on his adventure. He warmed up his food in the microwave, scuffed it down like a wild animal, then went back to his room to get some sleep. He was exhausted. When he pulled off his basketball shoes, yellow sand spilled out onto the carpet. The jungle beach had not been a dream, and Hoops again felt silly for not taking a camera or a journal. Well, at least I got a souvenir. Shutting his eyes, he thought about what his next adventure might be. He didn't seem to mind that he'd almost been eaten alive and lost in a strange world. He knew now there were more discoveries to make, worlds to explore and daring adventures to experience. He pulled the traveller's code out of his pocket and read it again. There's always another one around the next curve. He was ready for more, but after some sleep. When he awoke the next morning, he found himself face to face with King Tut, his pet mouse. Tut had gotten out of his cage again and had gone on his own little adventure, scampering around the house looking for crumbs. His little midnight mouse trips always ended up curled up beside Hoops's head. King Tut loved to snuggle up to Hoops's neck, where it was nice and warm and safe. You'd better get back in your cage, Your Majesty. Mom's going to flip out if she sees you on my bed. Hoops's mum wasn't a King Tut fan, as she didn't like rodents at all. But she had given the mouse to Hoops for his birthday last year because the pet was small, easy to take care of, and would keep Hoops's company while she was at work. Hoops found King Tut to be his best friend and truest companion. Who needed a dog? King Tut was smart and could do all kinds of cool tricks. Also, he liked to be petted. Quick, said His Majesty. He ran to the edge of the bed and made a huge leap off the covers onto the dresser. After sticking the landing, Tut scampered up the wall of the cage and dropped down through a hole in its lid that he'd chewed open over time. Squeak, he called when he was done. Yeah, sure, no problem, buddy. Hoop gave him a mouse treat before going to the kitchen for some breakfast. He could tell from his room that it was bacon and waffles, and the sound his stomach made told him it was time to chow down. On his way to the kitchen, he passed through the living room. He glanced at himself in the huge mirror hanging over their gas fireplace and stopped to practice a couple of goofy faces. When he tried his war face, bring it on, he told his reflection. Next he practiced his tough guy face. Are you talking to me, pal? Then he went back to his goofball faces, then confused faces, then he stuck his tongue out and played air guitar like a rock star. Rock on, bro, he said when he was done. His mum hugged him and left for work while he finished his bacon and waffles. Keep the door locked until I come home. If you need anything, you can call Miss Grankle next door. She always said the exact same thing when she left. Okay, bye, Mum. When the door shut, he scarfed down the last piece of bacon, dashed to the living room and plopped down in the big brown comfy chair by the fireplace. The chair faced the TV, and up until a couple of days ago that's how he'd preferred to pass the time. But now Hoops had zero interest in watching cartoons or doing anything at all except getting on with his next adventure. He pulled the timepiece from his pocket, popped it open and set it for 2 o'clock. Let's do this, he said as he wound it up. When he began rubbing, the magic glowing particles in the room came alive and rotated around him. Faster and faster, closer and closer. Just then Hoops felt a little cold nose in his right ear. Squeak! Whoosh! The living room vanished. When Hoops opened his eyes, he said, What are you doing, you crazy mouse? You can't go on this adventure, it's too dangerous. He reached up to his right shoulder to pet the mouse, but King Tut wasn't there. Then he felt Tut's cold nose on his left shoulder. Hoops looked all around him, feeling both confused and disappointed. He reappeared in an apartment very similar to his own and in the same building. His mind raced. Did the timepiece not work the way it was supposed to? Where was the next world, the next adventure? Looking around some more, he thought that maybe the pocket watch only made him travel across the hallway to his neighbour's apartment. It had the exact same size and layout, only reversed. But the chair Hoops sat in was his chair. The bookcase had his books on it, but was now on the left side of the TV instead of the right. The fireplace was now on the right side of the chair, but was supposed to be on the left. Hoops jumped out of the chair and explored the apartment. The kitchen was just like his, only everything backwards. There was even a plate of unfinished waffles on the table, minus the bacon. In his apartment, his bedroom was the one on the left-hand side of the hallway, and his mum's was on the right. So in this strange reverse apartment, he decided to check out the bedroom on the right. It was full of books, his books, but they all had backwards letters on the covers and spines. There was a mouse cage with a hole that had been chewed away in its lid on the desk. The bed was identical to his own, and there was yellow sand on the covers as well as the carpet. There could be no doubt that this was his room, but he was getting dizzy from everything being opposite from where it normally was. After he'd lived somewhere for several years, he walked around corners and flipped light switches without thinking about it, but everything being in an opposite spot made Hoops feel woozy and confused. Back in the living room, he leaned on the mantel of the fireplace. He thought if he looked in the big mirror so that everything would appear back to normal might help him calm down and get rid of the dizzy feeling. But things only got worse. He couldn't believe what he saw as he leaned on the mantel of the fireplace and peered into the mirror. To be more accurate, he couldn't believe what he didn't see. Hoops had no reflection. "Whoa!" Hoops hollered. The room in the mirror image was back to normal, but oddly he couldn't see himself, King Tut, or the big brown comfy chair. "I think we're in the mirror." Hoops suddenly froze as he watched in the mirror. The front door opened and his mum hurried back into the apartment. It was like watching her on TV. Turning around and away from the mirror, he watched her reflection as she walked right past him, mumbling something about keys as she went in the kitchen, digging through her purse. "I'm in a mirror dimension." This was a reflection world, and it mirrored his own. Whatever happened in the real world dimension, which Hoops now called the 630 world, controlled what he saw in the mirror world, and he was actually there in the mirror world. His mind burst with questions. What an amazing discovery, the first person to ever cross into another dimension, and he was only 10 years old. "Look out, history books," he told himself. "You're going to need a whole chapter devoted to the amazing accomplishments of Worthington D. Hooper, the greatest explorer of all time." "Squeak!" His Majesty agreed that Hoops was amazing. "Thanks, pal. You'll be the greatest mouse in the world's history, the close companion and loyal sidekick of the world's most outstanding adventurer mankind has ever known." King Tut leapt off his shoulder onto the mantel. He put his tiny paws on the mirror and scratched. He obviously missed his own reflection. "Me too," Hoops said. "It's weird not seeing my reflection, but if we're the originals, shouldn't we at least see a copy of ourselves here somewhere?" Hoops's brain hurt from trying to figure it all out, and he still felt a little dizzy. He plopped down in the chair. "We must have replaced the reflections when we got here. That's probably why Mom didn't see us when she came home. We weren't actually there. We were here, inside the mirror." Hoops thought his mum would have freaked out though, if she had looked in the mirror and saw Hoops standing next to her. This was a very complicated world. It was too easy to make a mess of things. He was ready to go back to the 630 world. "Let's go home." As Hoops helped Tut onto his shoulder, he looked at the TV. "I always wanted a TV in my room. I wonder." He unplugged the TV from the wall and carefully picked it up. He never knew they were so heavy. Setting it on the floor, he sat on top of it and pulled out the timepiece. He made sure His Majesty was safely seated on his shoulder and set the pocket watch for 6:30. As he rubbed the watch, the swirl of magic glowing dust appeared and blocked his view of the reflection world. This would be a perfect place to hide if I ever needed to. Whoosh! And the reflection world vanished. Hoops was back in his living room, with Tut on his shoulder and the TV from the mirror dimension under him. Everything was where it's supposed to be, and the words and letters on all the books were no longer backwards. He didn't feel woozy or confused anymore, and was relieved to no longer be in the mirror dimension. As he thought about how awesome it would be having an extra TV in the house, preferably in his room, his butt hit the floor. Ouch! The extra TV had vanished right out from under him. It had quickly dissolved into nothingness. It had just gone. Then Hoop saw something that freaked him out. The other TV disappeared too. The original. Then it was gone. Both TVs were gone. This was a hard lesson to learn, and he wasn't excited about this discovery at all. But he ran to his room and made an entry in his journal. 2 o'clock world. Mirror dimension. Rule 1. When the reflection of something crosses into the real world, our 6:30 world, it must replace the original version. And if the original version vanishes, so will the copy. Note, I've somehow lost my own reflection and King Tut's. I just destroyed our TV by bringing its reflection to the 6:30. Hoops knew he was in big trouble. How would he explain this to his mum? She would never believe him. He would no doubt be grounded for a month and forced to do all kinds of stupid chores to earn money for a new TV. Crash! The sound of breaking glass made him jump. He spun around and looked at the mirror over the fireplace. It was fine, no breaks or cracks. Then he heard voices. Grown men's voices. They were low, mean-sounding voices coming from the kitchen. He peeked round the corner into the kitchen to see 2 men dressed in jeans and black hoodies crawling through the kitchen window.